My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently?
So, lately, David, you and I have been playing in a series. We've done, 2 sessions of a series called The Path to Dim Carcosa. And I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so in context, this is part of a bigger kind of living campaign that you have going on called We Hunt the Keepers.
Right, yeah. The premise of this bigger campaign, it's really just kind of a justification for having lots of different groups of players, playing every month, The idea is that the player characters serve this church that is going out to hunt these heretical monks. And these heretical monks study these places and people and objects called the keys. And the church believes that these heretical monks have some sort of grand conspiracy, and they want to destroy the keepers as a result. The player characters just take the job, right, and go do it. But of course, there's more to it than that, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding all of that basic sort of premise of the series. And the Path to Dim Carcosa is just one adventure within that. You're right. This is what I want to talk about. So, for the last series called Children of the Eight-Legged She, it was a 4-session series, and I chose to make the first session a distinct story from the other 3 sessions. It was a story about the party hunting a keeper named Lord Caspian Gal. And Lord Caspian Gal was this noble, and he had this masquerade ball, and the party was going to infiltrate the masquerade ball in order to kill him, and also to find his key, which was called the Crying Mirrors. Okay, so that was the whole premise of that, and it was great. It was super fun. I enjoyed playing Lord Caspian Gal. Really great session. For the Path to Dim Carcosa, I was going to do the same thing, where the first session was a completely separate story from the last 3 sessions, and that's what we're doing. But because I had a couple of players cancel on me for the first session, I decided to do something different, narratively speaking, with that first session, and I decided to do the story of Lord Caspian Gal again with 2 of the returning players who had done the first one. And you were one of those players, and Fraser was the other player, and it played out. It had all the same story beats. Your characters arrived at this masquerade ball being thrown by Lord Caspian Gal, except he was the keeper of a different key. This time he was a keeper of the key called The Woman Whose Face Is Not But Tentacles. And you as players were totally aware that you were sort of doing the same adventure again with the same story beats and stuff, but with just slightly different elements changed, and your characters were somewhat aware of it. And so it had this sort of surreal, dreamlike quality to it, which is what I was aiming for. And I'm curious what you thought of it, because it was kind of out there.
So it definitely had some Groundhog Day vibe going on with it, but
right, yeah.
But the setting was not static. We were not in the exact same manse that we had been in before. The party was similar. Of course, Lord Caspian was essentially the same, except for he was a keeper of something else entirely. We interacted with him in different ways, and I think that Fraser and I had a good time letting our characters slowly recall, as if through deja vu, that they had done this before, even if it was slightly different. And we had a lot of fun hitting echoes of the same kinds of consequences and actions that we had done before. Specifically when we took out Lord Caspian the first time, when the Crying Mirrors were the thing that he was keeping, he got trapped into a mirror. And then when we locked him up this time, or took him out this time, where he was the keeper of this woman whose face is not but tentacles, we got him trapped in this arcane box that got swallowed up into the ground. So it was interesting echoes.
It was a neat echo, yeah. And that was I guess it was just by happenstance that it happened, right? Like it just kind of played out that way, that like you ended up trapping him in two different ways in this story. I liked it too. It did have a Groundhog Day kind of quality to it. It was fun to watch you and Fraser play through it, realizing what happened as it dawned on you, like what was going on. Because in the beginning of the first one, I had you all standing in a line at the party, waiting to get into the party. And at the head of the line, at the entrance of the mansion, Lord Gaul had a basket of masks, and he would ask you questions, and based off how you answered the questions, he would give you a certain mask to wear that he thought reflected your personality. And so I just started off with that again, like you guys in that line, and this time you had a different interaction with him, and you got different masks, and I just thought it was really fun. It had it felt like Groundhog Day. It felt a little bit like kind of it had like kind of a David Lynch vibe to it. It had a dreamlike quality to it. It felt like you guys were stuck in just like a weird narrative loop. Because it's a separate story from the rest of the adventures in the series, the rest of the sessions, that is, it almost feels like it's unstuck in time. Like we don't know when your characters were experiencing these parties at these different Lord Caspian Gal's homes, right? And I thought it was fun.
Yeah, the last we saw of Lord Caspian Gal, he declared there would be a third, so I'm curious to see.
He did.
He said he was going to
get another. He kind of threatened you and said, "I'll get another crack at you." Right?
Yeah.
So he expressed some knowledge, right, of what was going on. Like he understood better what was happening, even though he didn't quite reveal it. So anyway, it was a bit of a gamble for me personally. I don't think I would have done it if I'd had players other than just you and Fraser. I happen to trust you and Fraser a lot, and I know that you guys trust me, and so I was willing to risk it, to doing something so strange, But anyway, I thought it was a good gamble. It was fun.
No, I liked it. I thought that it was an interesting take on starting an adventure series, and I'm curious to see if we do end up returning to Lord Caspian Gal's manse for a third and maybe final, who knows, time.
I feel like you guys like I like the idea of maybe you guys learning a little bit more about it each time if you do it, again. So the whole series, the whole We Hunt the Keepers campaign is filled with mystery like this. There's just so many like unanswered questions and so many ambiguities.
Yeah, it's good. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For? It looks like the Gauntlet is getting up to all kinds of Dungeon World stuff. Do you want to highlight some of that? Am I right?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. We haven't checked in, I guess, with listeners about stuff that the Gauntlet is up to. So, of course, Discern Realities is a production of the Gauntlet gaming community, and we know many of you are part of that community, and that you engage in different parts of it, not just listening to this podcast. But we haven't really talked about some of the things we have coming up, and I thought it'd be a good time to do that. First of all, we're running quite a few more Dungeon World games on Gauntlet Hangouts now than we used to. It used to just be basically me kind of holding it down, and then David started running some. Mm-hmm. And now I think we have like 4 or 5 people doing Dungeon World games at different times. And so over the next few months. And so that's an exciting thing. Go check out Gauntlet Hangouts if you have not done that yet and you want to get opportunities to play Dungeon World. We have Gauntlet Con. That was announced recently. We have not announced it here on this show yet. So Gauntlet Con is going to be an online gaming convention being held from October 20th to October 22nd. And we aren't sure yet about the details in terms of like whether and how much it will cost, people to participate and things like that. It's still a few months out. But we do know that we're going to have a ton of different games. We're going to have a bunch of special guests and panels, and we'll be doing a few fun things there. David and I are trying to figure out like if we want to do something special for Gauntlet Con in terms of the games we run for it. So if you have any ideas you want to pitch to us listeners, we're open to that. Like, let us know. I'm excited about Gauntlet Con, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We were recently in the same part of the country for the first time in a while, and we sat down and talked about what we might do as Discern Realities kind of special events for the con.
Contribution to Gauntlet Con, yeah.
Yeah, and if listeners have thoughts on what that might be very interested to hear what you are interested in seeing happen.
Yeah, for sure. We are now doing YouTube videos, we used to not make our Gauntlet Hangouts YouTube videos available, but we're doing that now. So you can go to our YouTube channel and see our different playlists that we run, or different playlists of the games we run for Gauntlet Hangouts. So that's pretty cool. We have launched a Gauntlet Discord server. We're still kind of figuring that out and deciding whether we like it better than Slack. I think we'll get there at some point. But one thing I'm planning for the future for Discord is we're going to do scheduled voice chats on Discord. So this would be for people who support us on Patreon at the level which they can access the Discord server. But basically the idea is we'll schedule out some very like specific discussions on Discord, and myself and possibly David and some other people from the Gauntlet network of shows will be available on those channels to like chit chat with people who tune in. Topics would be like the games we're playing lately, maybe just topics related to the role-playing game hobby as a general matter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, speaking of other shows and hosts of other shows, we have great news for the Gauntlet community that Plus One Forward, with Rich Rogers as a host, has been nominated for an Emmy. If you like Powered by the Apocalypse games, like Dungeon World, if you like Plus One Forward, definitely go and vote for it.
Yeah, I think when this episode comes out, there'll still be a few days left to vote. So we'll include a link in the show notes. So if you hear this, like, go vote right away. Do not hesitate. We would love to see Plus One Forward win that. That would be really, really awesome for the Gauntlet and for Rich. So just a few things going on in the Gauntlet community that I want to make listeners aware of. I know that a lot of our listeners kind of are, a lot of them are really, really focused on Dungeon World and maybe don't care too much about stuff outside of Dungeon World as far as what we're up to. But I will tell you that the listeners who have gotten involved in the broader Gauntlet, becoming members of our Patreon and the different things that come with that, the zine, codex, like all that stuff, like people who get more involved with things, like really, really love it. So I just want to just kind of throw that out there again. Like, even if you just come to our G Plus community and hang out with us there, it's a terrific way of just having, I just think, just a more like interesting and personal and better experience, but if you just want to listen to the show, we'll take that too. So no big deal. That's all I got.
Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be.
David, I wanted to talk about a couple of moves that seem not so great on their face, that seem a little whack, actually. And I think there's a big consensus with a lot of Dungeon World players that they are stupid playbook moves. But I'm here to say they are not stupid playbook moves. And the first one is Ben Barr's Lift Gates on the Fighter playbook. What do you think? Stupid move, not stupid move?
So I honestly never had the experience that you had where I came from D&D 2E where Ben Barr's Lift Gates was like a thing. So the first time I saw it was in Dungeon World, and it was an early role-playing game experience, and I was like, that sure does seem useful.
Ben Barr's Lift Gates, I've seen a lot of the conversations surrounding the Fighter playbook, and part of that conversation is that the Ben Barr's Lift Gates move is really dumb. And in fact, there are some alternate Fighter playbooks out there that do away with Ben Barr's Lift Gates. They remove that move and add something else in its place because
having played the game a long time, I believe it. Yeah. So here's the thing. I get why people think it's a dumb move. The Fighter can literally just break things real good. I mean, that, it's kind of not super interesting from a narrative standpoint. Like you intimated earlier, it is a holdover from D&D. I get why people don't like it. Here's the thing, though. Ben Barr's Lift Gates becomes a lot more interesting when you compare it to Defy Danger Strength, right? Defy Danger Strength is probably the move you would do if you were not a fighter and you were trying to bend bars or break something or lift gates or get access into something using strength, right? There's nothing about the bend bars, lift gates move that says only the fighter can attempt to bend bars and lift gates, right? Anyone can try it. What I think is interesting is if I'm some other playbook and I'm trying to do something that is the fictional equivalent of bending bars or lifting gates, I roll Defy Danger Strength. I don't have a ton of control over the outcomes, right? No, you could the GM has so much more control. I could, if you were saying I want to break down the door and then you get a 7 to 9, I could say, okay, it's going to work, but it's a worse outcome. You like splintered it and now you've really hurt your leg that you used to kick it in, or something like that.
Right, exactly. Whereas if the fighter gets a mixed result, they still get to make their choices on like what happens. They still have a huge amount of control over what happens in the fictional outcome of them trying to break down the door. And really the only thing the GM can do is there's a sort of like implied outcome based off the choices you don't make, right? Like, so if you choose not to do it in a hurry, then maybe it takes a little while and the GM can do that. But the power of the bend bars lift gates move, and frankly, the power of most playbook moves, is that it kind of like constrains the GM's choices, right? The GM can't just hit you with whatever. Like you are not subject to the vicissitudes of the GM's imagination, right? On bend bars lift gates.
You're not risking all kinds of anything from happening.
Exactly. And I like that. Like, it is, to me, it's like a key insight, right? I think like once you've kind of like unlocked that little bit about the bend bars lift gates move, lots of other things make sense, right? I mean, Trap Expert certainly makes a lot more sense, you know. And I don't consider that like a bad move. It's not one of the ones I'm trying to defend here today, but
no, but it's very similar to Discern Realities.
It's a similar idea, right? It's basically Discern Realities, but it's like really fictionally specific Discern Realities, right? Like it, you know, anybody can check for traps, but the GM can probably honestly answer your question on Discern Realities and still not reveal whether there's a trap, right? Like if they chose to. So
exactly. Yeah. So you've convinced me. Bend bars lift gates is a great move. What other
best
moves?
Move ever, obviously.
What other moves are you defending here today?
The other move I want to defend here for basically the same reason is Bardic Lore. That, I think I've talked to people who have pulled the Bard playbook, and you know I'm no fan of the Bard playbook myself, but for different reasons. But I know people who have pulled that and they see Bardic Lore and they compare it to the other Bard moves, particularly Arcane Art, where you shoot magic out of your guitar. They see that and they think, oh, that's dumb. You know, oh, I get to know something about monsters, or I get to know something about this ancient history, like whoop-de-doo, right? But it's super powerful. Like,
yeah, you don't have to make a roll.
Yeah, you don't have to make a roll, right? Like, you don't have to do spout lore. You get to just like
you
know
just
a
know
thing.
Things.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's so it's like, to me it's like classic. Like, I've never played Dungeon World. I don't know what I'm talking about. Like when you look at a move like Bardic Lore or Bend Bars Lift Gates and you say, why would you want that? You know, like that just seems dumb in comparison. Oh, I can weave spells with my guitar or my lute or whatever and heal things and do all this and do all that. Oh, and I can also know something about history. You know, like it just doesn't compare well on paper, but mechanically it's super powerful. And I think like when you kind of understand that, I feel like that's one of those moments when Dungeon World lights up, right? Where you're like, oh, I kind of get Dungeon World now, you know? You don't provoke a roll on Bardic Lore, which makes it really, really strong.
Yeah, that in itself is really powerful when you don't have to roll. But in addition, I recently ran a game with a bard, and the Bardic Lore was really important because it kind of goalposted what their bard was about, what they were most interested in learning things about. And they knew valuable things whenever we encountered things like that, just automatically. Yeah.
There's a sort of like weird meta power to moves, right? Like, because the moves you choose, or the playbook you choose, and the moves you have available to you, they do that goal posting idea. That idea of telling the GM what you're interested in doing is powerful in its way, right? Because most GMs will try to, like, if they're a good one anyway, will try to angle the fiction toward that, so you have an opportunity to exploit that move and see how cool you are, right? And so yeah, there's a sort of like meta thing going on there too that make these moves like really interesting. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that a little bit because I've been brand new Dungeon World players have been on my mind lately. I think it's because of our conversation with Fowler last time, and this is another one of those areas where you get a brand new person, or you get somebody who deigns to create things for Dungeon World, has not played the game that much, and therefore doesn't understand how some of these things operate. that's another thing that's on my mind. I think it's worth thinking about that, you know. I like this sort of like this. I think it's a great way of thinking about the moves. This idea of like, you know, they have a, you know, they may seem simple on the surface, but what they're really doing is they're telling us very specific things about how the fiction has to be and what the outcomes have to be, and they are limiting the GM's ability to fuck with you. And also, so I think it's super cool. Other moves, like we mentioned, Trap Expert. I don't think that's one that needs defending. I think it's a cool move on its face. Same thing with I Am the Law in the Paladin, another move that I think is really cool on its face. But if you look at it, it could just be Defy Danger Charisma. Like anybody can stand up in front of a crowd and make a little speech and command someone to do something, right? But only the Paladin is guaranteed to have those very specific sorts of outcomes, and they get a +1 forward when they act on it on a 10+. So I love it. I love that. I love this aspect of this interplay between playbook moves and the basic moves. I think it's understanding that interplay is a really, really, once you understand it, super neat. And I think it helps you like in your own move creation process, right?
Yeah, if you're out there writing moves and things like that, these are things that are worth thinking about. How can you help the player by limiting the GM? Also, how can you help the GM by helping them see these are the outcomes?
Right. Yeah. I mean, kind of pulling back a little bit and looking at like apocalypse world-based games more broadly. I mean, the great beauty of the moves, this idea of moves, like what it did is they showed the GM what sorts of things the player is interested in, and then it shows the player what they have to do narratively to make those things happen, right? Like you've got the move trigger, you know, so it's like a two-way street. It's a beautiful ballet of collaborative storytelling, and I love it.
It's I wasn't thinking ballet. I was thinking, you know, rubber meeting road or cog meeting wheels, where mechanics and fiction meet. It works.
I'll take that works. Too. Anyway, I just wanted to defend BBLG and Bardic Lore because I know that a lot of people have a hate on for those moves, particularly BBLG.
Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me? Jason, this week I wanted to talk a little bit about a particular set piece that I created. I created it specifically for a scene in Anglekite, but it's something that could be adapted to just about anything. The premise is that your adventurers are exploring this magical place that once was home to these things called the Wordfey. And the Wordfey were creatures that could create things by speaking them, by writing them down. Honestly, you could substitute the Wordfey with a wizard or some other magical being really, really easily. But this is just kind of an interesting set-piece library with a custom move that is dangerous and interesting, I think.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear it.
If you want to read the first paragraph, I will read the second that contains the custom move.
A room is filled with sound of music. Bookshelves filled with volumes line every wall, and the smell of leather fills your nose. The majority of the room is filled with tables. In the corner, you see several stringed instruments playing, though no one is handling them. Books float off the shelves and land on the tables, quietly opening up and their pages periodically turning as if someone is reading them. If you make a loud noise, you will hear the sound of someone clearing their throat as the music stops and all the books snap shut. Stand quiet long enough and the music will begin again, coaxing the books back open, the offense to the serenity of the library forgotten.
In the center of this room, on a vast table, is a book with pages as large as a man. Every one of them appears to be blank. This is a fabled creation book, one that the Wordfey used to write all manner of things into existence. There is a stylus, but no inkwell. You see dried blood on the nib of the stylus. Here's the custom move. When you take the stylus into your hand and attempt to fill it with your blood to write in the book, decide with the GM the desired effect of the writing, then roll plus con. On a 10 plus, the stylist drinks enough the first time to finish your writing. Take the best of 2d10, ignoring armor. On a 7 to 9, the stylist is still thirsty and needs to drink again before your writing is finished. Take the best of 2d10 twice, ignoring armor.
That's super interesting. So give me an example in the fiction of like why you might want to engage this move.
This is your player's chance to get creative and try and come up with a solution for a serious problem that they have. If they've come this far, this is almost like the most similar move I can think of is this is like a ritual move, but really, really dangerous for anyone to try.
That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah.
So if they have a big problem, they can come here and risk taking a lot of damage or potentially dying as they try and pen out these words in their own blood to create something that can help them with their problem.
Yeah, it seems pretty intense. It's pretty intense in terms of the damage that you take, but it's interesting. I like it from a narrative standpoint. Like I could see this playing out. I think it would be like you said, it's definitely a set piece, right? I mean, this is like an extended sequence that we would be kind of watching play out, and I think it'd be pretty interesting to kind of see it all go. So yeah, super cool. I'm into it.
Yeah. So if you would like, give that a try. We tried it out in Anglekite. And it was fun. It was scary and intense, and we almost had someone die.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a like push your luck sort of thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Let's move on to our next segment.
This episode of Discern Realities is being sponsored by Scablands Press and their game The Indie Hack. One of the things we've talked about in the past is how Slade wrote the Indie Hack to be extremely flexible and well, hackable. His own follow-up game to the Indie Hack, Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers, uses the system, and I want to tell you about another one that's coming up. Maria Rivera has written a game called Heroes and Crystal Kingdoms, which, by the way, take a moment to clock the acronym. Got it? Great. Heroes and Crystal Kingdoms uses the Indie Hack to tell stories inspired by JRPG video games like Final Fantasy. Characters in Heroes and Crystal Kingdoms are comprised of an archetype and a job. Archetypes are what motivate your character to seek adventure and consist of the classic JRPG fantasy tropes such as the Chosen, the Survivor, and the Amnesiac. Jobs are the package of skills and special abilities that make you effective in the world, and include instantly recognizable things such as the Black Mage, the Monk, and the Mystic Knight. And in keeping with classic Final Fantasy-style video games, you can actually switch your character's job pretty freely. Heroes and Crystal Kingdoms will be available in an upcoming issue of our zine Codex. To check out the Indie Hack system reference document and make your own hack of the game, go to the Scablands Press website. Thanks again to Scablands for sponsoring the show.
Our next segment is What is About to Happen. Listeners, we are returning to the adventure of St. Evelyn the White. She is outside the town of Felbit. She's encountered 4 soldiers. 3 of them, Alfred, he seems to be the leader, Beckett, a larger man, and Arnie, a poor, small, pock-faced boy who doesn't seem to be getting enough food, are currently arguing about what to do with Evelyn. They have another hostage with them, Venka, who is an herbalist, and she is being pressed into service to help the army. And just now, St. Evelyn has stood up and attempted to sway them. Unfortunately, things did not go quite as planned, and the boy, Arnie, recognized her as the Mad Saint. So, St. Evelyn, you had gotten a partial success on your move, Lead the Flock, but you had gotten some aid that failed. So, as a part of that miss condition, the 2 that are arguing continue to argue and are not paying attention to you. The only one that is this boy, Arnie, who was eating the dead dog because he's so thin and just needs food. So you can use your move, Lead the Flock, but it's only going to affect him. And he is terrified of you right now. He is just mumbling to himself. All the other soldiers are just ignoring him like they usually do.
And he had kind of said, "Oh, it's the Mad Saint. It's the Mad Saint," right? Didn't he say that out loud?
Yeah, he screamed out that it was the Mad Saint, and he's just mumbling to himself now. First one, save us. Save us all from those who stray from the path. Save us from the heretics.
But the other ones, because they don't take him very seriously as a general matter, they're just ignoring him right now.
Yeah, they're too busy arguing. The fourth one is suspiciously silent. He's just kind of watching on.
I know that guy. That guy who just kind of hangs off to the back and watches everybody else have drama. One of my options is that I can cause the listener, in this case it's just Arnie, not the whole group, to fall into a frenzy of emotion. I've spoken my words, and Arnie is getting increasingly agitated as he realizes who I am, and yet my words have a very piercing power over him. They are infused with the power of the gods. And he's getting angry.
He starts making, like, the evil eye towards you, and, like, stumbling back, and he stumbles underneath the feet of his two companions and trips Beckett up. And Beckett had it with Arnie. Damn you, Arnie. Get out from under my feet. Please, just keep her away from me. You don't understand. You've got to listen. Why don't you ever listen? And Beckett just, like, backhands him with this gauntleted fist. And Arnie goes splaying out. He's much, much smaller. But he's not unarmed. And he starts to go for his sword. And then the last one, the one who has not spoken, Hamel, grabs his arms and just kind of pulls him back and is trying to calm him down. Hamel's making a lot of fidgeting gestures, and the other two are, like, shouting to him, like, let him at me, I'll kill that little bastard, it's about time. Venka is looking at you like, what's the plan now? She's not saying anything, but she's looking at you.
I would like for Venka, if she's able to just break away from them and run to me, and I will kind of, like, motion. I will kind of, if I can see if she's able to break away from them while they're distracted, I'll just kind of, like, motion with my hand, like with a come hither motion, like really quickly, like quickly come.
She is moving, but her feet are shackled.
Interesting. So she can't move quickly then.
She can move moderately quickly, but it's kind of loud. It's kind of clanky, but they're making so much noise right now they probably won't notice it. Do you have a plan for dealing with that?
It feels like time is of the essence here. I probably have something in my gear that would allow me to, like, cut off the shackles, but I don't think we have that kind of time, right? And so what I think I'm going to do instead is I'm going to beseech the gods to give her a blessing of freedom and release, and hopefully, like, just it'll just seem like happenstance or luck, but I would like for the shackles to just pop open and fall away. And so I will quickly beseech the gods, quietly underneath my breath, to help me in this situation, like help her, help me. Yeah, I'm doing invocation.
All right.
I got a 9. It says on a 7 to 9, the deity will grant me my blessing, but I will need to choose a requirement. The blessing I want is your invocation manipulates the realm your deity controls. And I think that I should probably unpack my faith a little bit here so you understand where I'm coming from with this. I release children from the pain of this world, this bleak, war-torn world. I release mothers from the burden of motherhood in this dark and desperate place where they often don't get the support of their communities. In a big cosmic sense, my God is all about releasing their followers from whatever binds them. And in this present reality, what binds us is the despair, the agony of this land. And so the gods I call to are gods of freedom and release. This is small scale power, dropping these shackles. That's nothing. And I think they will grant me that. But what about the requirement?
Your deity will demand something in return. You must go to Felbit. There is someone there that needs release.
I had hoped to just pass through, but as the shackles fall away and Venka comes quickly to my side, I see now that in receiving her, I am also receiving her burdens in some way. We've established that she was an herbalist. Presumably she had certain types of care over the community, and these soldiers were taking her away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in delivering Venka to me, I am also receiving her burdens and concerns, and I will take this. I intended to just pass through Felbit, but I realize now that the gods would have me be there, that my destiny was to find this woman, and my destiny was to end up in Felbit. So,
right. It might not be forever, but there's something important that your deity, the thing you worship, is driving you towards Felbit to take care of on a divine mission. And as you have said, her shackles, they do fall away as if they weren't properly bound to her legs. None of them see it except for Arnie, who is currently being crushed underneath all of their weight, and they are all just pummeling him. They've had it with him, and he still is looking out at you and Venka, and he's just croaking under all their weight. You heretic! You child killer! That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
As previously mentioned, we are a production of the Gauntlet gaming community. We can be found in our G Plus community. Just go to the community section of G Plus and search for the Gauntlet. You will find us there. We have a bunch of other shows that you should go listen to. You can find links to those on gauntlet-rpg.com, including the Annie-nominated show, Plus One Forward, a podcast powered by the apocalypse. We are also on Patreon, where you can support us if you like what we do. That's patreon.com/gauntlet.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.
So I would roll plus wisdom on that. Great radio, me digging for the dice. I got a 9.